Hello everybody, Chris McNulty here, your educator in our Advanced Diploma in Leadership and Management. How are we all doing this evening? And in this particular semester, we'll be looking at the more strategic issues involved in leadership. And tonight's lesson, we're going to be focusing on how leaders develop strategic awareness. What we're focusing this evening, we want to look and see what do we mean by strategic awareness. And then I'm going to help you assess your own strengths and weaknesses. And then we look at how you align your strategy, your vision, and your staff in terms of what are the leadership development capacities around strategic leadership. So, Emanuela is asking, does semester 3 just refer to the third quarter of the year? No, we have this advanced diploma, Emanuela, that's covered over 12 weeks. And the first week focuses on the individual aspects of leadership, as in leading yourself. The second semester then leads with leading the organization. And then the third semester, or the third 4-week semester, focuses on strategic leadership. And you can enter at any one time, okay? So are we all clear what we're going to focusing on this evening? So like everything else, I tried to start with a quote that sets the tone for the lesson and gets you to think about. Now, Jeff Bezos is CEO of Amazon. They've had quite an amazing chart of growth over the last number of years. And when he talks about strategic awareness, what he said is what we need to do is to always lean into the future. When the world changes around you and when it changes against you, what you used to be a tailwind is now a headwind. And you have to lean into that and figure out what to do, because complaining isn't a strategy. So I'll read that again because I just wanted to make sure that you're getting it. What we need to do is always lean into the future. When the world changes around you and when it changes against you, what used to be a tailwind is now a headwind. You have to lean into that and figure out what to do, because complaining isn't a strategy. Do you know the difference between a tailwind and a headwind? If you're sailing a boat and you have a tailwind, it's pushing the sails from behind. And so you're navigating nicely, you're going through the sea. When the wind shifts and it comes into your bow, it's pushing you back and you're not making any headway. So what really Bezos is saying, it's when the change gets hard, when times get hard, and you're forced to take a reckoning. What got you here in the last 5 years isn't necessarily what are going to get you to the next 5 years. And now is the time you need to be thinking about what's changing. How do I begin to appreciate the signs of change? So what is strategic awareness? You know, strategic awareness is a space where new ideas and innovation are constantly generated from a heightened sense of awareness. And with this strategic awareness, leaders operate behind the goal of competing to actively seize new and different possibilities. And they're living in the question, and they're acting on the possibility of things. They make the improbable or the seemingly impossible come about by bringing awareness and resources to things that normally lie beyond each of our own sense of reality and the business as usual. And this helps to enhance the potential and the probability of success. Why? Because it ensures that prospects and possibilities get generated into a reality. So strategically aware, leaders, they have the point of view that there's no short supply of clients and funding, and there's no limit to possibility. They're aware that an industry's structural conditions are neither inevitable nor they're finite. And they're able to perceive and find distinctive market positions and sustainable advantages in a multitude of ways. And they're looking to recognize the opportunities and seize them. Now, how does this arise? Well, it arises from a constant stream of actions, choices, decisions, strategies that have to be made in the present time with as much conscious awareness, foresight, skill, astuteness, and wisdom possible. And what I'm getting at here is that leaders cannot take shifts in stride if they become attached to a fixed strategic direction, because customers won't always be the same. There's no predetermined outcome. That's why you have to be constantly chatting to your customers. Without a sense of strategic awareness, you may remain unaware of new opportunities, or you're unable to appropriately perceive critical threats. And leaders, and I'm taking, leaders as aspiring leaders and managers, you need to be thinking that strategic awareness, you don't become derailed. You need to be thinking that you have a road ahead that matches your vision, matches your purpose, and matches those values. So, what do we put it? I put up 2 definitions there on screen for you. Strategic awareness really is the process of fusing awareness to strategy and incorporating real-world knowledge of industry, global trends, and possible futures. And every innovative product at Apple started with Steve Jobs' intensity of awareness of new possibilities. He had a heavy dose of creative strategies that made the possibilities a reality. Now, not one of Steve Jobs' ideas would have stood a chance at becoming an innovative product had he not been able to operate from a strategic awareness. So what does strategic awareness do that's different? Well, it seems to place equal emphasis on both strategy and awareness. It's the process of fusing awareness to strategy and incorporating real-world knowledge of the industry, global trends, and possible futures. So what you do, in effect, is you're looking to see what are the business drivers, what's driving my business. And normally it can come down to, the competition. It can come down to the price point at which your customers are prepared to pay for your services or your goods or your products. It can come down to how you go about generating your sales. It can come down to a change in the buying behavior of your customers. These are various things called business drivers. And there's an awful lot of things that impact on them, such as the regulatory environment. So if a new tax is put down by the government to say, we're going to charge an extra 3 cents on every dollar for what we pay for gas, what we pay for alcohol, what we pay for tobacco. So there could be an economic and regulatory impact that's changing your business. And a strategic leader is going to have to take that into account. Equally, there may be a change in technology. There may be a particular new piece of technology. For example, a lot of our banks and retail banks are closing the amount of hatches they have on site, and they're moving to a more online system. And that's leaving a lot of people in rural communities around the various parts of the world who aren't so adept at using technology, and they don't feel comfortable, and so they feel a little bit discommoded by technology. But then there will be other strategic leaders who say, okay, how can I utilize technology to make it better for older people? So you'll get inventors coming along with various apps that can help older people take better management of their day, particularly when things like, say, coming to taking their medicines. So a pharmaceutical strategic leader will look at the technology and see, you know what, rather than having us to worry about our customers taking our meds, maybe we can send them an automated signal to say, this is the time to take your tablet on such a day. So strategic leaders are constantly searching for signs of change, and they're looking for these strategic business drivers that impact their businesses. Okay. Have you guys ever had a chance to think strategically? Have any of you ever had a chance where you've been asked by a leader to take part in a project where you've been asked to either look at your competition and write a report, look at the strategic environment into which you're operating? And when we talk about a strategic environment, we're really talking about those 4 areas. Your key business drivers, who your key competitors are, what is the regulatory environment that governs your industry. Is it the FDA? Is it, the Food and Drug Administration? Is it a transport logistics, Department of Transport rules on weights, measures for what you can transport? Is it the Environmental Health and Safety Protection Institute? So there's regulatory environments that impact your business. And then what's the technology that has seen your business get to where you are today? But then you suddenly see that that technology isn't really able to cope with the new whiz-biz IT sector that's developing in the last 15, 20 years. So a strategic leader is having to look at all this change that's coming and try to get a particular handle on it. Okay? So, when we talk about strategic leadership, what the strategic leader is really doing is they're developing two things. They're developing insight and they're developing foresight. And when we think about, I was asked a number of years ago, I was looking after the training manager for the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport for about 7 years back in the very early 90s. And we had an infrastructure in Ireland in which our logistics and transport sector was there was a lack of investment from government. And they asked us would we participate in a foresight run by the Department of Industry and Transport and Communications. And the Foresight Committee was to do some long-term, over 10 to 15 years down the line, what would, if we had no funding constraints, if we had no issues, if we were to just dream, what would be the best way to develop our particular sector? And they use this as a blueprint to help devise policy over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And when we look back on it now, and you look at the Foresight report that we did at around the year 2000, it's amazing to see how many of the ideas did come true and then how many were left behind. But that's part of strategic awareness. Some things will not be acted upon, but you know what? The main ones will be. So what you're looking to do when you're developing insight and foresight, it's really what's the future environment to which your company and yourself are going to be operating in. And some people, they're not born with the natural gift of enhanced strategic awareness. And it's something that you must focus on and develop consciously over time. And with it, you become more alert, more attentive to what's happening in the business world around you. And you're more prepared to gather and analyze information that you're receiving. So you're looking at attending trade shows. You're a member of the local trade association. You're reading trade journals. You're trying to get a handle on what's the IT systems that are best shaped and built for your particular business sector. If any of you, I'll write it in here, hoovers.com. Have any of you ever gone to Hoovers? Hoovers. Hoovers.com. If you go to Hoovers, what you'll find is they have strategic reports built by sector. So you can go to the pharma sector, pharmaceutical industry. You can go to the food and beverage sector. You can go to the transport sector. You can go to the leisure sector, hotels, business, whatever. You can go to the aeronautics and space sector. You can go to power, to oil and gas, to a whole range of business industries that are broken down. And what you'll pick up are the 4 key industry business drivers for that sector. So who are the big competitors? So if you were to look at, say, in the food and beverage, you'd be looking at PepsiCo, you'd be looking at Coca-Cola, you'd be looking at Nabisco Foods. You'd looking at all these big food service companies. Then you'd be looking at the regulatory environment in which they're operating, and then you're looking at the particular IT challenges they're facing, and then what are the IT solutions to some of those challenges. And when you develop this type of foresight and getting insight into how these industry sectors work, you then are able to talk to other people and other leaders in other organizations, and you say, our customers are changing, they're buying more online, and we haven't yet got a strategy for that. What are you doing? And when you ask these questions, you begin to see how, businesses are the same worldwide. i.e. you have to know your customers, and you have to recruit customers, and you have to retain customers. So what are you really looking to do? You're looking to do 4 things. You're looking to understand your business. You're trying to look and see, are there anomalies? Is there something that's changing that wasn't there before? And is this going to be something that's going to dominate the future, or is it just an anomaly? Is it just a little, wow, I didn't see that before and I might never see it again? But if it's something that's going to shape your future, you better start to understand it. So you have your finger on the pulse for signs of change. You're like the spider sitting at the center of the web. And as a little fly or an insect hits on the web and it sends a tremor, what you need to do, what Ron Heifetz asks you to do, is you extend your awareness out to the periphery. And you speak to the people who are out in the periphery. So your salespeople are out in the field, and you're finding out, why aren't we getting any orders? What's going on? What are our customers? What are our competitors doing? You're constantly scanning for signs of change. You consider what's going on around you. You know, is it a local issue? Is it national? Is it global? And why companies try to, you know, the phrase, they think global but act local. So they try to have all the resources that can cater for everything, but they're prepared to shape it to the needs of the local community. So you're focusing on your business and how it's operating. You also need to focus on your competitors. What are they doing? What products are they offering? What have they dropped? More importantly, what have they dropped? Why are you wasting money on something that your customers have already decided not to produce? So that you could be saving something. Because if it's a trend and they're on that trend early, well, then you're just wasting resources. So you understand what's happening in related industries. It doesn't have to be in your exact industry, because some of the best strategic leaders are what we call late adapters. They look at, they take time out to see what's happening in another sector, and they go, you know what, I think I could apply what they're doing into our business with just a little bit of tweaks. I must bring this to my team and see what's going to happen. Then they're looking at their data. You know the phrase big data, and a lot of people are still on, you know, they're really not really unsure of what big data means. But all big data means, it's putting some kind of analysis on all of the data that's going in and out of your company and your business sector. And it's analyzing your trends of your customers to give you actionable, ready decision-making capability data. And you do it. It all started from the whole CRM business back in the year 2000, when the first of the companies like Amazon started to take orders online. And then they set up these huge logistics and distribution centers that operated on a 24-hour basis and delivered next day to your door, the next couple of days. And then if you charged premium, it would be within 4 hours or whatever. That particular method of logistics and distribution changed the way we think about selling and automating our what we're selling. And a lot of businesses folded in the dot-com bubble because precisely they went for a business-to-business model. They set up their e-commerce websites, but they didn't have the ability to actually meet the needs of the customers at the end. So you need to know your data. And if you monitor interesting trends or recurring data, you know, you can begin to start thinking, okay, how do I respond rapidly to this valuable data? And you don't let the opportunities pass you by. You evaluate the intelligence you gather with an open mind and without any preconceived judgments. And you go to people in your team who are more knowledgeable than you, because remember, leadership by its nature is humble leadership. You go in and you say, guys, I've not seen this before. Have any of you? Oh yeah, I've been monitoring this. Well, maybe you might present a paper to the board next week. You know, you're using your team's insights as well as your own insights to actually get a handle on your data. And then the final thing is your team. As I said before, you need to be working out what is working, what's not working, and then you say, how can we put it right? What does your team need to succeed? What you're looking to do is to develop an as-is picture of the here and now. Why are we here? What got us here? Then ask yourself, is this going to be enough to get us to where we need to be in the next 5 to 10 years? Charlene's asking, Chris, would intuition play a big role at strategy? I think intuition wouldn't play a big role. Where it does come into play is when you've gathered enough data for your hunches to start taking effect. You can't just make a finger in your mouth and check to see which way the wind's blowing. You need to have some data. You need to have something that twitches your emotional and your situational antenna, if you get me. And once you've done the work and you've started to analyze what's happening to your customers, what's happening to your data, what's happening to the industry around you, what's happening in the related sectors, then I would say you can look at your intuition, okay? So guys, that's just 4 things you need to be thinking about. So what are the particular strengths of these strategic leaders? Well, there's 3 of them here, and it's both an organizational and it's a personal process. And it's one that you cannot ignore today. You've got to do 3 things well. You've got to understand your external environment. You've got to take decisive action, and you've got to expand the buy-in. And strategic leadership doesn't come easily in most organizations, guys. So don't be worried if you're suddenly saying, oh God, this is going over my head right now. Statistics show that fewer than 10% of leaders exhibit these strategic skills. So that's woefully inadequate, guys. So you're part of a club at the moment. But the mere fact that you're attending a course means you're rising above that 90%. You are rising above that. Okay? You are now part of an elite group of people who are investigating, how does my business operate? What are the key business drivers that are driving change in my business? Now, what strengths these particular strategic leaders have is that they have a really strong understanding of the operational side of leadership. Operational leadership rules the day, It can lead to a lack of focus, as one executive has put it. We're running fast in many different directions, but they need sometimes to stop and say, okay, why am I just so busy? Why can't I take time out? So what do you need to do? You need to start thinking, what is my understanding of the complex relationship between my business and its environment? And it requires a broad view. You need to be thinking about, who do I talk to? Who are the right people to talk to? Who are the people who are going to get me the important information with new perspectives? How do I ask probing questions that tries to break down the complex and facilitate a conversation that will allow me to say, you know what, my strengths in business are A, B, and C, but I see that the change is coming and I'm woefully unprepared for it. And that's okay. Precisely because you're aware that you're unprepared means you can take action. You can start speaking to people who are leaders in that external environment. So it's again coming down to be aware of your strengths and your weaknesses, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then to boost the level of strategic thinking, you need to be starting, asking these kind of questions. So what external or industry data is important for my analysis and response to these challenges that are coming to the fore? Why is it important that we succeed with this challenge? How does this challenge relate to the issues and challenges elsewhere in the organization? Because remember, departments and leaders tend to operate in silos. And it's only those truly gifted leaders learn to ask questions of other leaders to say, hey guys, we're doing this project. Are you doing anything similar? Yeah, well, why not? Let's get together and collaborate. It's all about collaboration. Who are the key stakeholders we need to speak to? What have they got? What opinions, what needs, what experiences, what perspectives can they bring that are relevant to my challenges and to the challenges in our organization? Okay. Then what we need to be thinking about is that once we've actually got some of this data, we start to look at taking decisive action. And a plan is only a plan. The actual strategy lie in the decision and choices people make. And they facilitate other strategic actions too, by balancing the direction, the autonomy of the team, and whether or not you're going to say, team, over to you now, or do you need to be constantly in there helping them to manage to go forward? But really what you're looking to do is you're looking to expand the buy-in. You're inviting others into the strategic process. You're forging relationships inside and outside your organization, guys. Don't just think you have to do it inside. There'll be a lot of people who will have an opinion on your business, and a lot of people you will previously up to now have ignored it. Now is the time to start navigating the political landscape and finding out, why are there detractors of my business? So I'll give you an example. A lot of you are probably saying, you know what, I don't have these particular skill sets in my team, so I need to be looking at attracting a new talent. And so you're going to be hiring for new talent, and you've got a set of job competencies. You want to say, yeah, I'm looking for some strategic leadership skills. But what do you do first? What is any prospective person going to do? They're going to be looking you up on Glassdoor, for example. They're going to be looking you up on social media to see, what are people saying about your organization? What might they be saying about your leadership? What might they be saying about your business in general? So you've got to be aware of what's happening in your environment. And then you've got to say, how is my culture impacting that environment? And when you begin to look at that, you're beginning to see how a strategic leader begins to say, you know what, we have work to do. And they have work to do both inside their organization and how that organization is perceived to their customers. That really is what strategic leadership is about. You're looking to see, are your customers going to jump ship, or are they happy to stay with you? And you can't do that unless you're talking to them continuously. And I would go back to Jan Carlson as CEO of SAS Airlines when he wrote his book, Moments of Truth. And he realized he needed to get everybody focusing on their customers. Okay? And when, what you need to be asking yourself is, I may be a leader, but I'm not going to be doing the work. It's my teams that are going to be working. So you've got to engage your teams and be asking them, okay, guys, here's what the data is saying. I want to take some decisive action, but I'm asking you because I want to expand the buy-in. I want to get your take. What would it look like if I succeed to go down this road? Is my vision compatible with your vision based on what our values and our purpose is? I just want to check. I want to use you as a sounding board. And then he asks them, or she asks them, who else needs to be on board, guys, to get this to work? How will the solution or approach help us in the achievement of our goals? And then are there other organizational systems, processes, and structures that need to be in alignment to facilitate the change? And then, like any good leader, they develop their stories that they can use when talking to others that basically illustrate how we need to behave and inspire others, because that's what leaders do. So they understand their external environment, they take decisive action, and they extend the buy-in. Now, other things leaders do to cultivate strategic awareness. There's 5 things that you need to be thinking about. The first one is expanding awareness. The second one is curiosity. The third one is leading with courage. The fourth one is ensuring you've got that big picture. And then the final one is leaders are constantly humbled. They're prepared to be open to change. Because ultimately what your customers may do is they may go to another supplier, which they do all the time. And how are you going to, if you're so fixed and set in your direction, but you suddenly find that you ain't got any customers, you need to be prepared to change. So what are the things we look to do? Well, the first one is, the key to being strategic is awareness. It's your intrinsic faculty and it's your inner resource. And for most people, it is under development. And what you've got to be thinking about, you've got to be thinking of what could affect the positioning of your business, your product, your service, and generate new growth opportunities. And without the willingness to be aware of everything, you may be unaware of new opportunities. And you might be able to perceive these critical risks out there. So you need to be understanding and expanding your awareness. Okay. Secondly, you need to be intensely curious, guys, about everything you encounter. You know, good leaders have great communication skills, not by accident. So every time they're doing something, walking to the lift or walking to the water cooler, they're talking to people. They're trying to get an insight. How are things going for you? What's your challenge at the moment? How are you overcoming that challenge? Asking just 3 questions that are strategic in nature, but they're being fed to them by people who aren't in leadership positions. They're pushing their antenna out to the periphery. They're finding out what's going on. Have you dealt with this issue before? What's this about? I'm getting this thing on my, it's coming into my inbox. It's a bit of spam mail, but it's an interesting article on such and such. Do you know anything about it? Yeah, my brother works in that industry. Well, could you put a little paper together for me? I'd be interested to hear more. They're intensely curious, okay? They're persistent. They're relentless in their search for insight. They're trying to get inspiration. They're trying to get ideas. And this insatiable curiosity is the key to being strategic. It brings out the boundaries that define conventional practice. You know, it goes beyond the predictable outlines. It tries to reduce conformist behaviors. It's not about business as usual. Because what these strategic leaders do is they step beyond them. I haven't got the title of the book at the moment, but there is a leadership strategic author. He's a bit like Jim Collins. It's an Indian guy and another guy, and they talk about blue ocean strategy. And it'll come to me. One of you will probably know it already. But the book is called Blue Ocean Strategy. And they put together a slide, and it showed a whole load of sharks operating in a kill zone where there was a whole load of bait fish, and the sharks went in, and within 10 minutes the water's all red. It's all churning up, and it's helter-skelter. And the authors say what really you should be looking to do in strategic leadership is to think about how do you get out of the competition where you've got all of these competitors eating each other, trying to beat the price down and trying to win. What you need to be doing is discovering some level of disruption where you can jump out of that pond and take over the whole rest of the blue ocean to swim into. So they use that metaphor of, you know, the blood shark infested waters and then a whole ocean beyond that where you can sell into your services. And I like that idea of strategic awareness, of expanding your awareness, expanding your horizons, guys. Then you need to be intensely curious, guys, you know. And when you're curious, you step beyond. And once you've done that, you're starting to gain insight. You can now start to think about the courage to stand alone, even in the face of unfavorable consequences, and being willing to be a nonconformist. Once you've got the, and you know, one of you asked earlier, you know, where does your intuition come in? Now is the time in which you stand and you say, you know, here's where I'm willing to go. And you have to be willing to be indefinable and willing to be receptive, yielding, open, naturally connected to life, spirit, and all that is. You're willing to be controversial because you understand that change is coming. But you keep an eye on the big picture. You know, a key ingredient in keeping an eye on the big picture is a willingness to let go of any fixed positions you might have and of all the predictable and constancy involved in that fixed position. You know, a fixed position is the limitation that keeps you from seeing other possibilities. You won't see other possibilities because you've shut them out of your awareness with your point of view. And that's where leaders learn to be humble. They may not have the full picture. So they invite others to get involved. They get buy-in from their teams to say, this is where we need to go. I don't know how to get there, but I think we need to go in that direction. Help me gain the direction. So you need to be expanding to seeing that big picture, okay? And then finally, you also need to be open to change. You need to commit yourself to change in every aspect of your life, guys. Be willing to stay open to the new, the unfamiliar, and the unknown. Because when you are able to be open to change, you're able to present to your team that, you know what, the times are a-changing. We will not be able to depend on what got us here, and we have to move, because if we stand still, our competitors are going to pass us by. So that's just some of the needs as to why we have this thing called strategic awareness. So how would you go about assessing your own strengths and weaknesses? Because it's something all of you are going to have to do. I would go out, if you get a chance, go back and look at Michael Jordan in his heyday when he was with the Chicago Bulls. And they used to play those incredible basketball games against the Boston Celtics and the LA Lakers. But what Michael Jordan said about strengths and weaknesses is quite a good metaphor for how you as aspiring leaders and managers need to be thinking about it. And what he said about strengths and weaknesses, he said, my attitude is that if you push towards something that you think is a weakness, then I will turn that perceived weakness into a strength. Now, a lot of us don't have the capability to instantly change direction and set your team of 5 basketball players on a court to a hard press, win the ball back from an offensive movement, and then immediately go on the attack. But what you're really trying to do is to understand, where does your team sit in regard to your overall strengths and weaknesses? Because remember, a leader is not going to be able to do it by themselves. But what good leaders do is they buy in from everybody around them. And then when they've charted the vision and they say, this is where we need to be, they bring in their team. But they also help themselves first to understand their own strengths and weaknesses, and then they start understanding the strengths and weaknesses of their team. So let's look at where we might begin, okay? The first thing you got to do is, self-aware leaders, they're more productive and more effective. And the research says that because they don't go down rat holes. They've actually spent some time thinking and being aware of what's happening around them. And the first 4 things you need to do is, you first need to evaluate where you are. You need to look at that back and see, okay, am I constant? Are my actions constant with these strengths that I have? And then if they aren't strengths, how do you go about asking for help? Because you're not necessarily trying to change your weaknesses. You're just trying to say, how do I minimize my weaknesses by using the strength of others? And then it's getting this balance right all the time. So what do we, how do you start? Well, I'd first say to you, you need to tap into your strengths. You have to evaluate your skill levels, what your leadership style is. You have to know where you're strongest and what areas you need to work on. For example, if you empathize well with people, if you have that strong sense of emotional intelligence, you may earn trust easily. But if you have a disability such as attention deficit disorder, these kids who are using these little spinners now because it's keeping them active in something and it's keeping them from being distracted in other regards. If you're distracted, you may not be able to follow through on promises. So the trust you effortlessly gathered will soon lose its effectiveness if you don't address your haphazard follow-on skills. And while a self-evaluation may prove useful, there may be a coach out there who may be more effective to help you assess your own strengths and weaknesses. Because awareness of your strengths, guys, and awareness of your weaknesses, they're powerful tools you can possess to grow as a successful leader. So that's the first thing you got to do. And there's lots of tools out there that you can use. Just type in SWOT analysis and strength finders, and there's books out there that'll help you assess this. Then you need to be thinking about, how do you gauge your effectiveness, is to consider your own track record. If you suddenly find that there's recurring problems, they may signal an area where you need to devote more effort. For example, if your suggestions are being constantly ignored by the higher-ups, you may need to work on your communication skills. For example, if you repeatedly find yourself having to explain yourself to your board, you may need to spend more time building relationships. Because remember, leadership is about engagement, and engagement helps to build trust. When you've built trust, you've got respect. When you've got respect, people are more likely to believe what it is you're selling. Because as Simon Sinek says, if people understand the why of what you believe, they're more likely to believe you when you try to sell them something. So you need to consider your past accomplishments and your strengths, what you've counted on to achieve those results. Then again, you may have become complacent and allow your weaknesses to overshadow your strong suits, to use a pun from Bridge. Perhaps the biggest area you need to be asking for is asking for help. Leaders do have natural talents on which they build their success. Instead of trying to copy other leadership styles, they rely on their positive strengths. And then once they've identified their own personal strengths, they work on developing them even further. And you can hire people to perform tasks and duties for which you don't have a passion. If you're a charismatic and impassioned speaker, but you have trouble framing your thoughts, you can hire a speechwriter to help you put your ideas into a manageable format. So effective leaders, guys, don't always worry about seeking help, because they seek help when it's needed, and they encourage others to develop their own natural talents for the overall good of the team, the organization, and for your customers. And knowing what your team's strengths and weaknesses are helps you to readily identify where you need to be now, but more importantly, where you need to be in the future. And then it's getting the balance right. It's finding a balance between your strengths and your weaknesses. Strengths that you've built on your reputation can turn into weaknesses when they become unbalanced. You may have superior analytical skills that you've allowed to forecast with remarkable accuracy. And then suddenly you find in today's world, it's a weaknesses because you end up overanalyzing situations that are no longer directly applicable. And you're trying to force through your ideas like sticking a square peg in a round hole. It ain't going to happen. So you got to stand back and find balance between your strengths and your weaknesses, okay? Then what do we do? I'm not going to spend too much long on the SWOT analysis, because there's enormity of content out there on the web. How do you do a SWOT analysis? But basically, a SWOT analysis, it allows you to assess your own strengths and weaknesses and those of your team around you. And there's two sides to it. There's an internal focus, which are your strengths and weaknesses. And then there's an external focus, which are the opportunities and the threats. And really what you're asking with yourself when it comes to your strengths are, what are your core strengths? And a weakness is really a liability or an area of opportunity for growth. And the opportunities might be the external factors that the organization should develop. What's coming down the line? What can we avail of? And then the threat might be, what external factors are beyond our control that could place the organization or a project or even yourself at risk? And if you ignore it, what harm will you do? So I've given you some examples here on the next slide, just in order for you to help. These are some common questions that you can think about. There's a recent study by the US Small Business Association, and it said that roughly 50% of all businesses fail within their first year. And there's no shortage of these top 10 reasons why business fail. Poor management, lack of capital, insufficient marketing, flawed business plans. But when you talk about why a lot of businesses fail, it's because they've not really understood the missteps, the mistakes, and the opportunities that can determine if your company sinks or swims. And really the struggle for survival is the fittest win out at the expense of their rivals, because they succeed in adapting themselves best to their environment. Now, who said that? Most of you know that. I'll say it again. In the struggle for survival, the fittest win out at the expense of their rivals, because they succeed in adapting themselves best to their environment. And that was Charles Darwin. So no matter how unique, innovative, creative, or original your product, service, or business is, there'll always be competition, that it's vying for your customers. And you know what? It's a good thing. Competition triggers our will to exist and reminds that it's truly survival of the fittest. And I'll give you an example. If you're lucky enough to be able to take your partner out for a dinner on a Friday night, where should you go? You should go to the busiest street in town where you've got 5 or 6 restaurants all next to each other. Why? Because the competition forces each of them to do better in order to retain customers. So don't worry if you're going to a busy place. Generally speaking, go locally where the locals are, particularly if you're visiting in a foreign country. Go to where the locals are going and go to where it's busy, because people are constantly looking for your support business, so they can't afford to do poor. So what are some of the questions you should be asking yourselves? Well, if you're looking at your internal factors and you're looking at your strengths, you're asking the question, what's the best part of what I do? What do I do best? Why do people engage with me? What gives me the greatest sense of accomplishment? Is it my communication skills? Am I good at team building? I seem to be good at decision making. So there are examples of the internal strengths. External factors might be, is there a particular demographic or market that would likely buy my product that I'm not reaching? For example, there's a whole group of millennials and now the under 16s to under 19s who are coming through. Have I even thought about how my product needs to impact these particular people? What direction are consumer trends moving? Can I get ahead of the curve? Can I even shape the curve? Can I capitalize on any of my competition's shortcoming? They're not opening on the hours of business at this time. Can I do something different? And then weaknesses. Weaknesses, you're not necessarily looking for ways to truly change them, because do you really ever change? I'm not sure you can change yourself ultimately, but what you can do is you can minimize or reduce the impact those weaknesses may have on those around you, because that's really what leadership is about. Leadership is being aware of the behaviors that you as a leader are making that will either inspire others to change or turn them in the direction in which you've had a negative impact of your behavior on them around them. So what are the questions you can ask yourself? What can I do better? In what areas do I receive the most complaints? Am I spending money on something that isn't necessary? So look to your competitors. Why have they dropped that line? Why am I continuing to spend money when nobody else is buying this stuff? So you might look at your financial accounting analysis. You might look at operational excellence. These might be areas where you're weak and you say, who in my team is good at this stuff? Who can give me data that really is helping to be actionable? Who's going to help me to be innovative? We're not innovative enough. We're not creative enough. And then what are the threats coming down their way? What trends are emerging in industry? How might they impact the way you do business? What shelf life do I have? What are the main factors causing my cart abandonment, for example, in my e-commerce shopping side? Is there another company with a similar product that could potentially draw customers away from me? These are all examples of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Are you getting this, guys? Is this helping you just to see how you develop this strategic capability? Then we focus on strengths-based leadership. It's a style building on from your strengths and weaknesses that says, okay, I know my own strengths and weaknesses, but you know what? There are other people on our team that similar have strengths, and they may be able to balance the weaknesses that I and my team might have. So what they do is they look to these four things. They look to draw in and get buy-in around consensus and delegation. And you work with experts in areas where you're less experienced, and that's also a sign of strength. It's not a weakness. It's not a weakness to turn around and say, you know what, I know nothing about IT, but Jason down in the IT department, he's a whiz on this, so we're going to bring in Jason, we're going to get his insight. You improve your engagement. You encourage people to focus on their strengths because it increases team member engagement and enjoyment. Believe it or not, guys, there's a statistic out here I'm just trying to get. Yeah. If you improve engagement, encouraging people to focus on their strengths, a recent survey found that only 1% of employees become disengaged if their manager actively focuses on their strengths. So only 1% became disengaged. However, the complete opposite is true, while some 40% become disengaged if they are ignored. And what do leaders do? Just to, for all you newcomers on the course, what we've seen up to date is that leaders do four things very well, and I call it engagement. And engagement is providing clear direction to their teams. It's actually giving them feedback on their performance. It's rewarding and recognizing their people for the effort that they put in. And it's communicating your vision, your values, and your purpose on a regular basis. And if you do those 4 things well, you are engaging with your team. And engagement leads to satisfied and happy employees. So you improve your engagement. And then effective hiring. You hire people based on their individual strengths, not because their skills and interests align with your own, but because they may actually bring in more to the team. And then you encourage creativity. You're going to be more likely to be more confident in delegating and passing on responsibility to your team members, and less focused on making people, putting that square peg in a round hole. That'll reduce creativity and innovation. So guys, these are simple things that you can do. It's called strengths-based leadership. You can go and find more on it. But effectively what you're doing is you're leading from a position of what are the collective strengths that we as a team have, and how can each of us balance and countermand some of the weaknesses around us, okay? So I know we're coming up in the hour, but I've just a couple more slides here on aligning the strategy, vision, and your staff. So Jack Welch, the great leader at General Electric, he says, you've got to eat while you dream. You've got to deliver on short-range commitments. And while you develop a long-range strategy and vision and implement it, the success of doing both, walking and chewing gum, if you will. So you can't afford to do one without the other. You've got to focus on the long term, but you also got to bring it in and operationally align it quickly. So the strategically aligned enterprise is really made up of what we call a value chain. And when your enterprise has got purpose, when you focus on a business strategy, when you've got organizational capability, when you've designed a set of resources and you've got a resource architecture and you've got management systems in place, that is what we consider to be the enterprise value chain. And what you need to be asking yourselves is, how well does our business strategy fulfill our enterprise purpose? How well does our organizational capability support the delivery of our business strategy? How well do our resources enable the development of our organizational capability? And then how well do our management systems drive the performance of our value resources? I talk about the value chain because in around 2008, at the financial crisis, I worked in a company in which we had to lay off 13,000 people. And in one of the closed factories, they laid off 3,000 workforce out of a workforce of 5,000. And it really took its toll on the company. And the company leadership got together around the senior management team and they said, how do we ensure this doesn't happen again? And the leaders in the SMT sat down and said, okay, let's look at our value chain. And people didn't really understand what they mean by value chain. They said, let's look, and the term value chain is really just a way of expressing what would have been your supply chain, but now you're looking at where you can add and remove value right across your complete supply chain. So from cradle to grave, as it's called, when you start to come up with an idea for a project to define when the customer pays for it, and how do you retain your customers. And a value chain exercise looks at, this is where we are now, but this is where we want to be in the future. Where do we add value and where do we remove those obstacles and barriers that are hindering us? That essentially is what an enterprise value chain. And what we did was we decided we needed to upskill our people. And we said, these are the skills that got us here right now, but they're not the skills that are going to get us in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years. And we need to be certifying, getting people trained so that our salespeople can now sell on the basis that our support teams are certified across all of these areas. And that was a value chain exercise that I'd recommend all of you to be thinking about. So how do you go about building this alignment between your people, your policies, and your practices and your process? There's 3 things you need to be doing. The first one is you've got to enshrine an acceptance of failure. And willingness to admit failure isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength, because you're basically saying is there's a return on investment calculations that you can actually prove that the more you've actually investigated how you're going to succeed, there's a correlation between how many times you've failed to the overall success of the project because you've gained experience. And when you've got the collective experience of all the people on a project who said, we tried it, but it didn't work, but that's okay, let's try again. And you go down a new avenue. Now, a person like Steve Jobs at Apple put a clear boundary around for this type of failure to succeed well. And as John Maxwell, he says, you learn to fail quickly, but you learn from the failure. And if you learn from the failure, you're making it safe. You're enshrining the acceptance of failure. And if people learn to admit failure early, then what will happen is more people will readily identify that they can trust these people rather than say, oh yeah, everything's going great, boss. Oh yeah, everything's going great. See you in 3 weeks' time. Oh yeah, everything's grand. And then it's a failure. You're wasting your time. You're wasting everybody's time. Far better than saying, this isn't working for me. I needed some help here. What have you learned so far? Well, we took this road. Well, maybe if you take that road, okay. And as long as you're able to be agile and adapt quickly, well, then you're setting yourself on the road to success. And the way you do that is you access in other peers. You access in the expertise. Who are the people who really seem to understand what I need in this project? You know, there may be people who aren't traditionally popular. They have a predisposition to question everything, to challenge. They disrupt the status quo, but you know, they may be exactly what your project needs. You may have all the dreamers, but you need a realist to be brought in. And then what you do is you focus on experiential learning. You give people access to projects in which they can learn through doing. Not through reading a book, not through coming to listen to Chris McNulty, but they're actually involved in trying to develop a solution to a customer issue. And when you've got that intense focus on resolving the customer issue, you then start to build critical capability. And the way you generate it is you start saying to the team, here's an issue we need to resolve. Who are the experts we need to bring in and collaborate around? You know? I've put up this picture of Rodin being a strategic leader. You know, leaders need time. You need to bring your whole self to the work. You know, you've got to bring, when you come in as a leader, you've got to show that you've got a full set of capabilities. You're giving time to express that I have confidence in my people and I'm now present. And when you're present, your empathy levels are up. You're in tune. Your situational and emotional intelligence are in tune. But you do need time to stand back a bit and you need time to be quiet and reflect. You question the way in which you question things. So I'll say that again. You need to question the way in which you question things. Solve the problems inherent to the way you solve problems. Why did I make that decision? What were the implications of my decision? Would I have done it differently the next time? How am I going to apply this learning going forward? And then you recognize that leadership development is an ongoing practice. You know, admit that you're vulnerable and you don't have all the answers. That actually is one of the highest praises that leaders get from their employees who are marked as leaders. They say that their leaders are humble. They don't say they've all the answers. You know, it is important, guys, you do that. They make it easy for others to share ideas because they encourage new ways of thinking. So strategic leaders keep on learning, guys. They align the goals. Again, I've mentioned this thing. They provide consistent feedback. Managers who consistently provide feedback can't keep employees focused on their performance. Feedback acts as a reminder. You provide it constantly. It's one of the 2 of the 4 things that are constantly required of leaders: communication and providing regular feedback. Because if you can show that your feedback is consistent and it's aligned to your purpose and your values and your vision, it gives freedom for others to go, and it gives that sense of clarity in the decisions that they have to make because they're told exactly, you're okay, you're doing a great job, you're on track. Do it a little bit differently the next time, but this is where you need to go. They're constantly giving direction. And it's helping the person to grow because they know they've got that fail safety net behind them, that it's okay to actually fall because the leader is there to pick them up again and set them in the direction in which they need to go. But good leaders set tasks, they allocate tasks that are in a way in which they're given on the basis of their strengths, not on their weaknesses. Why would you give somebody a job to see them fail. What you want to do is to give them the job and say, I want you to understand how you can grow. Here's a tough challenge. Here's a stretch challenge. But it's okay. Ask people in your team support. Come to me if you don't know how to proceed and I'll help you. But I want you to stretch and grow. And if you fail the first time, come to me early and say where you're struggling and I will help you. And then for God's sake, so many of us refuse to do it. We ignore it and it's a killer in a team. And that is, we don't recognize our people often enough. Recognition is what makes leaders seem to be such good leaders, because it gives the impression to the team that the leader has their back and the leader is interested in them. Why? Because they're basically saying, team, you're a great team, you're doing this and you're doing it positively, you're mirroring the behaviors that our customers desire, well done, but we don't do it. And when you get these three things right, when you give consistent feedback, when you're able to allocate tasks based on the strengths of your team, and when you're able then to recognize people, everybody's a winner. This whole idea of an employee recognition program, we don't do it well enough. 90% of 823 HR professionals surveyed said an employee recognition program positively impacted engagement. But less than 53% of employees knew what that program was. So 1 in 2 people did not know how they were supposed to be rewarded or recognized. It's crazy, guys. So how do you align your organization with its strategic goals? You establish the why. We've talked about Simon Sinek. You establish the why. A clearly established why will allow leaders to get on the same page and build a lasting organizational culture. You align performance management with strategy and culture. An agreed upon why will become the foundation for all decisions that relate to building your organizational culture. You expect accountability, not just from yourself, but from your teams. And when teams come to recognize you for calling out wrong behaviors, it gives confidence that they're able to say, something's not right here, boss. I'm not sure what's going on. Well, let's look at it together. And by learning to fail quickly and say, we're not going to the right track, you're holding people to account because they're not afraid to fail. So they're not afraid to put up their hand up and say, boss, I made a complete mess of this one. Okay, what did you learn? Where do you think the steps went wrong? How far did you get and then things went awry? And then you set behavioral goals. Why? Because you're able to live your life according to your vision, your values and purpose. And you're able to set standards of behavior. And you should be able to say to your team, this is the standard of behavior that I want you all to portray. We will not leave, as they say in the Marines, we will not leave a colleague behind us. You'll say to your team about your customers, we will do what's right for our customers. And when people understand what's doing right, they'll go the extra mile. And if they go the extra mile, their leaders will reward them. And when the leaders reward them, the actual team feels successful. And when a team feels successful, it's more mated, it's more prepared to get up in the morning and say, you know what, I enjoy my work because I'm stretched, I grow, and my leaders take time to know me as a person, what motivates me, okay? And then it's, open book management. I don't know if any of you have ever been given access to your books, but there's a trend now emerging where businesses will actually allow all of their employees to see the critical accounting and financial data of a company. And what it's basically doing, it's basically saying, train employees so that they become business literate, empower them to use that information in cost cutting and quality improvements, trusting them as business partners on an equal footing rather than you're just a subordinate and a minion. And you regard them as being fair in, treating them fairly for the firm's success because they see the financials. Not a lot of people do it, but there's just a suggestion there. So what drives this strategic leadership capability? It's superior performance. There's basically 3 or 4 business drivers that leaders know about their business that are critical to success. No more than 3 or 4. They find out what's my competitors doing, what's the regulatory environment which I'm operating, what are the technology changes that's impacting my business, and what are some of the solutions. Generally speaking, those leaders who answer those 4 questions, they help understand the drivers of their business strategy. Then they go on to shape their business culture. How, through my communications, through my behavior, how do I shape the decision-making processes in my teams? How do I ensure that my teams have the right data and the knowledge collaboration so that they're able to share ideas that will trigger the behaviors that leaders and their teams are expected to exhibit? And then they're constantly looking to develop talent. They wanted a sustainable talent system. They're looking to see, okay, do I need to bring in new talent? Can I develop it from within? What are the skills? What are the competencies we need to grow? And then who's going to grow them? Do I need a training budget? Again, it's about going into the team and saying, what can I do to help you succeed? And then it's trying to design the organizational structure around this business strategy that is going to be supportive of your vision, your values, and your purpose, because they're aligned back to your customers. Are you seeing that, guys? And then, lastly, you elevate leadership to your, as a business priority. You start thinking about it's no good just having a leader. We need to have leaders across all of our teams. And how you align leadership to your business strategy, you basically say, I'm going to champion and invest in leadership anywhere I can find it. Anywhere I can find it. In the lowliest steward who opens the door in the morning to the washing lady and the tea lady, everybody can display leadership. And you cascade your business drivers, your understanding of what's making your business tick, and you give everybody insight into your business drivers, who your competitors are, what's shaping their strategy, what's the technology they're using, why are they using it. You allow everybody to grow and prosper. You seize the leadership capacity gaps. So you find out, where do we lack leadership? Where do we need leaders? When are they going to be ready? Why do we need them ready? For what do we need them to be ready? What challenges do we need them to be prepared for? And then you start accelerating that leadership growth. You transform your business. You start accelerating your leaders to a succession management program. Here's where I see you now, but in 3 years' time, you're going to be there. But in the meantime, I've got a 15-month plan for you. I've got a 26-month plan for you. And then in 2 years' time, you'll be able to take the helm and I'll put you in a project role, which will prepare you to shadow for a period of 3 months. And by the end of the 3 years, you're going to be a new manager that will lead with purpose. And then what you do is you develop a performance culture with the right performance management system. So you begin to understand the data of who's performing, so you can now call out and reward these people. And then you achieve outcome success results. Because leaders isn't a fuzzy wuzzy style of leadership I'm pushing here. It's all about the results. What's the impact that your leadership style is having on your teams and those around you? It's either having a success or it's having a hindrance. If it's successful, it'll show in your results. You'll deliver insights with your leadership analytics. You sustain momentum for your leadership initiatives. You provide constant feedback. You allocate tasks according to people's strengths. And you ensure everybody gets recognized. Guys, it's easy, isn't it? That's what we're going to leave it there with. What we covered tonight then, guys, what do we mean by strategic awareness? How do you strengthen your own strengths and weaknesses? And then how do you align your vision, your staff, to create what we call that enterprise challenge value chain? So guys, any questions? I know we've gone over, but I'm prepared to take a couple of questions there, guys. Charlene saying, Chris, I'll have to come to South Africa and give this course. They have it all wrong. Thanks, guys. Yeah. Emmanuel is putting it, which are stuck in an old style of leadership and control, and the reasons why a lot of young people leave an organization. Scary to see how much creativity is lost due to old beliefs and restrictions. Absolutely. And to think that what got you where you are now won't get you to the future, and yet people constantly fall back. So that's why in a couple of lessons time, we're going to be talking about the need for adaptive leadership. And I go in to explain using Ron Heifetz's analogy. It's not just good enough to survive, you've got to thrive. And how you thrive is you're adaptive. And if you adapt, you're agile, you're quick, you've got your fingers on the pulse, and you're really able to scan the horizon for signs of change. So that comes building on this lesson tonight. Okay, I think that's enough for this evening, and we will speak to you in a couple of days' time. So great talking to you, and I hope for a lot of you, you'll go home and you'll start building out your strategic awareness. Focus on your strengths and your weaknesses, and then start looking for the opportunities, and then how you can handle some of the threats coming your way. Great, nice talking to you guys. Wherever you are, safe home, and stay safe, okay? Take care.